But it's very different. So the 20 days for a week versus now you're finally back. It's like, wow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's expensive. Yeah, right. But remember, it's least are either paid for a year or two, and you want to really get what it is.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you here today to the Fireside Chat with Jacqueline Boynton about where we're discussing reproductive rights. My name is Sheila Long, and I'm the founder of MalamaDoe. We opened in May of 2017 and started with 6 offices on the 2nd floor, which is one up, 2 common areas where we could congregate, where we used to have our Fireside Chats. And we've grown now to 13 private offices, 2 conference rooms. And we built out this space in March of 2020. So I signed a 5-year lease so we can continue to have events. So we will be here for the next few years and really excited to have everyone here. So when we grew this business, I always say we grew it with the help of a lot of strong women. So that includes, we had the owners of Cloud Red. I always say it was a 5-block radius. So we had Cloud Red across the street, which always brings a big draw. We had Collectivo, but we especially had the mothers at Lake Club School that really raised awareness about it and increased the buzz. And then I also had 2 women who worked with me every single day to take the idea into a reality. And that's Carrie Balmers and Julie Knox. So I always want to remember them. So as women, we do great things and we can accomplish, we can move mountains if we work together. So that's really the reasoning for having great women role models come and speak to us today. So that we can flourish and build community and help one another and build our communities. So that being said, just remember, we're here to support the most vulnerable person in the room. And you don't know someone's beliefs and background, so let's just try and be cognizant of that. And also the building, we're on 3 floors. There's 2 bathrooms on each floor. And it's very casual. Get up, have a drink. It's very relaxed setting. And then I'd like us to, we're gonna go around the room and introduce ourselves, say why we're here, and then I'll introduce our sponsor. But before that, I'd like to bring up our sponsor. I mean, we'll introduce our speaker, but I'll bring up our sponsor, Brenda King, so I can say it.
Hey, everybody. It's so awesome to be in a room full of women. I can't tell you how rare that is in my world, because I'm a mom of 3 teenage boys and a husband. So I just like, ooh, women. So anyway, as Sheila said, I'm Brenda King. I work at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and I'm here tonight to just kind of give you a little bit of information about what our organization does. And maybe one of you will walk away and say, this is an organization that I want to help in some way. So I'll share a little bit about us. So as you're here tonight, over the next hour and a half-ish, there will be 30 people diagnosed with blood cancer. That's 3 people every minute are diagnosed with blood cancer of some sort. Does anybody know anyone with blood cancer? So can I just ask, do you know what type of blood cancer? Same person?
I know directors.
Okay.
So my very bestie and legal partner for years and years died from myeloid, the worst.
Chronic myeloid leukemia.
And she lived 9 months instead of 6 months. Terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society was founded back in 1949 to help people who were diagnosed with blood cancer. And we've been going strong ever since then. We are the largest nonprofit committed to curing blood cancer. And as a side effect, we are helping to cure other cancers, helping to provide treatments for things like rheumatoid arthritis and all kinds of other diseases and cancers. So kind of a nice little side effect. So tonight, I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about our organization and the important work we do. Our speaker here tonight is going to talk about some things kind of related to maybe advocacy. We do a lot of advocacy as well. We fund research that is helping to provide better treatments for patients. And also we provide patient education and services. And those are the pillars of what we do. So as volunteers, potential volunteers maybe. What you could do is you could get involved with our organization as a fundraiser, as a volunteer, as someone who just spreads awareness about what we're doing, helping connect people. So my hope is that tonight, after our wonderful speakers done, that some of you stop by and talk to me, and business cards, if you want to hear more about how you can get engaged. But even better than that would be just if you keep an open ear, if you spread the word about our organization, because patients, I mean, there's HIPAA laws, right? Like we don't get a list of all the patients so that we can reach out to them. It really depends on all of you to go to your friend and say, hey, have you been connected with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society? I know that they can help financially, emotionally, clinical trials, whatever. So I'd love to speak to anyone later if anyone wants to stop by and chat. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And also they're looking for students who want to be the student of the year to raise funding. All right, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves and say why we're here. Kathy, would you like to start?
I'm Kathy Bacco. I was a member of Royal on that, and I like the topic. I like to be informed.
I'm Anna DeWord, and I'm just here to educate myself. I'm a neighbor of Jackie. Want to take the opportunity anytime I can to hear Jackie talk.
I'm Julie Shipping, and I'm here also just to hear the information Jackie has. I'm a former neighbor of Jackie, so I'm happy to be here.
I'm Spring.
Where does Jackie live? If I want to be a neighbor?
Yeah, I mean, maybe right now, how close is she? And I'm just here for more information.
I'm Christina. Spring is my sister, and she said, "Hey, I'm gonna go do this. You wanna come with me?" Sure. What are you listening to?
That and I needed her.
Hi, Susan Fontenot. I wanna get to know more about the topic. I'm on the legal side. My background is in HR. So I'm always very interested in these topics. How do they relate to the HR side? I'm new in the community, so I also want to go out and get to know perhaps some neighbors, but I'm not. But I'm definitely looking out to find some friends.
I'm Corinthia Van so not a neighbor, but I was a student of Jackie's years ago. And I'm here just to be both informed and supportive.
Kim Anderson. I work for a consulting group that does title mining for various universities, and so all of this is on point and also something I'm interested in and passionate about.
My name is Kate Greenway. I live in the neighborhood and been wanting to connect with MalamaDoe for a long time, and today's the day. And this topic is really dear to my heart, and I'm glad I found out about tonight yesterday. So
Again, I'm Brenda. I came obviously to share a little bit with all of you, but also I'm very interested in learning more, being more educated on the topic. It's nice to see everyone.
Hi, I'm Wendy Smith. I live here in Shorewood, about 2 blocks away, so I walk over. And I work at Market Law School, and it would be a good idea to be educated on this particular topic. So I'm glad to hear and learn more.
Hello, I'm Teresa Sturgill, and I came here last week for the first time, and I'm signed up this week and next week. And I volunteered to help by taking photos, so don't pay any attention to me. And this subject is so appropriate today with everything that's going on and stuff. I'm absolutely fascinated in learning, so as much as I can, I should say. So, thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone. I'm so glad to have everyone back here at meetings again. But so I'd like to introduce Jackie. Jackie was one of our first members, when we opened, and she's always been a constant support to, the cause and helping us. She serves on many different boards, we have a list of them here. Boards of directors, the Women's Fund of Greater Milwaukee, she has served. Meta House, the Wisconsin Judicial Initiative, the Nonprofit Center of Greater Milwaukee, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin, Citizen Action of Wisconsin, and Voces de la Frontera. And many, many more. She's always involved. She just had Mandela Barnes on her house. She's just always really moving the needle for women. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome Jackie up here.
Hey. Well, I have never done this, so this is all new. I guess if people want to ask questions, I'll talk. And there's, cover a lot of stuff. I don't know how long it'll take, hopefully not too long. And yeah, so I would like people to let the thoughts and feelings about what I'm saying. All right, so here we are in the slide. And these are just random quotes. The first one is Janet DeWart Bell. I don't know if people know who Derek Bell is. He's one of those culprits who really got into race class theory early on. And he's died in 2011. Anyway, I thought it was a great quote. But the one I'm like, a lot is people who do not want to be pregnant will find a way not to be pregnant. And my going through this research and thinking about really what is the history, it's an incredibly rich history. But throughout history, women have gotten abortions throughout all of history. So no matter what happens, there's going to be a lot of abortions going on. And in fact, one of the stats is that even with the Dobbs case, the latest decision, there probably will be as many abortions as there were before that. So don't know if that's true. Next slide. Okay, some facts. And these are facts I didn't know. In 2000, I started an organization called Women's Choice. And our goal in life was to support women candidates who were pro-choice, pro-women's reproductive rights. And it was like a mighty band of volunteers for a while, staff people, even had an office. And I knew from personal experience, which I can talk about, how important it was to have access to abortion. I knew it from a couple of different aspects. But I didn't know a lot of these facts. I do know that only women can have an abortion. That is something. So anyway, 60% already have children. So what does that mean? Don't really know. It just means that these are women in their reproductive years who make a decision to not have a child. They may have one, they may have two, they may have given their child up for adoption. And then at the end before Dobbs, Milwaukee, Dane, and Sheboygan were the only counties in Wisconsin doing abortions. And that's interesting because there were more places, but because there's been this squeeze going on up until 2022, there were less and less accessible places. I mean, if you're up north, probably you go to Minnesota. You'll probably still go to Minnesota because that's where you can go. So there was one part of the state that didn't have any access. And it's the rural up north. Services are farther apart from each other. Anyway, I consider it somewhat discriminatory. There's a lot of discrimination woven through abortion law, particularly with low-income women. So when we talk about Dobbs, that's the decision that was made a month ago. And so this just talks about the huge number of women that are affected. And then a good statistic is because I've learned a lot about what these words mean, like viability and conception, and gestation. But 73% of abortions were before the 10 weeks, which means they're very early abortions. You hear a lot about partial birth abortion, a lot about second trimester. Or, you know, mainly about sort of forced and partial birth, which is but the point of this statistic is that women are getting them early where they're safe. And that the procedure is not that complicated, and in fact, another factoid is early abortion is safer than child. And now with medication abortion, which is way after my time. It's still kind of a mystery to me what it is, how you do it, how scary it would be to be taking it at home and having whatever comes out happen to you. But over 50% are now done with medication. And post-jobs, it's going to affect the way women can get medication through the mail. Get it through the mail, they have to drive to Illinois to get marijuana and to get their medication. And okay, so this was I would have no idea. So this is the median cost in Wisconsin, $550 per medication abortion, and then the procedure is that range $646. So actually, if you ask me, it's not that expensive. I don't know. I assume it's more complicated with the hospital. I'm sure it's. Okay, Roe v. Wade. We brought on behalf of Norma McCorvey, who, when it was decided, she was 25, but she was, you know, she's sort of gotten bad press. Many of us paying attention to it, but we're still talking about Norma. But she was Jane Roe, and she had a child that she gave up for adoption. Then she got pregnant again, and she wanted to get an abortion, but she couldn't because she lived in Texas. And so she became the named person in this case. She ended up having the child, and one of the issues in Roe was she can't be a plaintiff because she's no longer pregnant. Because in the course of the case that took years to get to the Supreme Court, she had the baby. Not sure if that's turned out that well. Anyway, what Roe said was, before viability, you can't ban abortion. What is viability? What I've learned is that viability is 24 weeks, and it has been 24 weeks for a long time. There is a possibility that up to 21 or down to 21 weeks, a baby can live outside with cold. So that's so it cannot be banned before 24 weeks, except the 3 that was it. So the first trimester, no regulation. State cannot be involved in this reproductive health. Second trimester, protect the woman's health, which is one of the big regulations. And third trimester, you can ban except to protect the life and health of the mother. There are a couple more things about the role. So when Roe came down by the Supreme Court, the right, and I'll refer to the right as like, there's been a very robust, and we're going to talk about anti-abortion movement in Wisconsin. It's been very robust nationally. It has been. They've accomplished a lot in monitoring and keeping abortion limited. You know, they've been, you know, it's been pretty amazing organizing job they've done. But they said that Roe was the ultimate political activism. The decision that they made, they based it on the right to privacy. And if you paid attention or read any of the stuff about Dobbs case, the recent one, the court is saying there is no right to privacy, period, end of story, there's no right to privacy. That isn't in the Constitution, and it's a bogus basis for Roe.
Jackie, you're an attorney, right?
Yeah.
Just making sure.
What?
Well, because I didn't know if they brought that up, and I think it's on point with your background.
Yeah. So anyway, this role really led toward the beginning of the concerted effort to find judges that ideologically agree with the more conservative people. And I really feel like I'm impressed with that, because you look at the court now and the more conservative majority rules. And it happened with the Wisconsin State Supreme Court too. And the courts, this is true for a lot of political things now, but they don't seem to care about public opinion, because there has never been an opinion poll ever that said that the majority of people in the United States, maybe there's one that says 47% of Republican men maybe don't support the right to abortion. So anyway, that have said that it isn't a majority support for access to abortion. Now, there are lots of different variations on that, what that means to people. So Roe is concerned with the doctor-patient relationship and focused on the doctor's decision-making authority. It didn't really focus on the woman at all, which is, to me, okay, that was fine. I'm not going to do this. But they said the doctor's in charge and the state doesn't have regulatory authority over the women's bodies. Before Roe was decided in 1970, New York passed legalized abortion within 24 weeks. Within 2 years of that legalization, 2/3 of the 402,000 people that had abortions in New York. So there was so ever since Roe, there's been a squeeze. So Roe is 73, and there were cases going up to 89. But I was on the board of Planned Parenthood, I think, during at least the last 3 cases. So it was, you can imagine being on the board, how it was like their existence was dependent, not dependent on abortion, but dependent on reproductive rights and ability to present that service. So Webster can't use public resources except to save the life of others. So it cut off abortion access to a lot of lower income people. Then Casey, 1992, they got rid of the trimester division, which everyone actually was surprised they used that so rigidly trimesters, but upheld the constitutional right and said that it can't create an undue burden. That's a very but it can't do an undue, it sounds like it sounds for women. It can't be an undue burden on them. So what does that mean? Some of the undue burdens are the 24-hour waiting period slipped in there, which is a huge burden for rural people because they have to go to a clinic and then they have to go home or they stay in a hotel and they people have money to do that and they have to get rides a long distance and who's going to wait around for them. 24-hour waiting period, things like that. Other restrictions are, which you all know, you can turn this down, but looking for seeing an ultrasound of the fetus, and and then 2 doctor visits, and the counselors have certain things they have to say. Counseling for or organizations that will give you alternatives, help you with alternatives to abortion. And then Gonzalez was a ban on partial birth in 2007. Then Whole Women's Health, the latest one, was around admitting privileges, which I was like, I don't know, I mean, but admitting privileges is that you have to have the whatever it takes for a doctor to be able to practice out of a hospital. And what is interesting is that many doctors don't have admitting, they're doctors, they have great practices, but they don't necessarily have a hospital with admitting privileges. So that actually was a pretty good victory for doctors to be able to practice. So now I'm going to talk about our very own history. You've probably heard a lot about this 1849 law, and Josh Call, Attorney General, filed a suit. And it criminalized abortion and quickening. And what's quickening? Quickening is, does anyone know what quickening is? But it's
Quickening is when you feel the baby moving,
Yeah.
like 22 weeks usually or something. I mean, I don't know exactly when, but it's biblical, I think.
yeah, it's an
Quickening.
old word.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I don't know how it is, but yeah, it is up to the mother to say, now I can't get an abortion because I felt it, or now I know I'm pregnant because I'm feeling it and I can't get an abortion anyway. So life of the mother is the exception. There was no exception for rape or incest. The doctors had 6 years in state prison. And I put the timeline of abortion. It's really important. Prison's quite small, but throughout the whole. But we have a rich history. Then they removed quickening and got modern. And then the new criminal code, unborn child, they refer to, which meant from conception to birth. And this has come up, the term unborn child has come up recently with Senator Johnson, the election. He sponsored the personhood law, which says that any unborn child, and so any complete ban on abortion was, he supported that in 2011. It hasn't gone anywhere. And then in 1973, the law became enforceable, and they put in a new statute, which all states have to do. And there were no penalties, which is fantastic. So in October 2022, which is right now, so jumping along. Well, no. Still on this. So Wisconsin and its own legislature, for just 20 weeks or more, and you have to acknowledge yourself. These are not considered an undue burden. And there has been no penalty in Wisconsin for women seeking abortions. The main responsibility has always been on the doctor. The criminal code has been the doctor. There's this whole issue right now, women going out of state to get an abortion, to get medication, they could be criminalized. So Paul, our Attorney General, Paul, has filed a lawsuit challenging the 1849 ban and saying that the more modern law should supersede it. And part of his suit is that up to viability. Which is the states. His opponent, Eric Toney, will use Department of Justice funds to prosecute. Even in case of rape and incest is what he said. And then, as you know, I don't know, Paul has said he's not gonna use it. It's Department of Justice to prosecute or go after people. It's pretty bad. And then Evers, this whole issue on binding reference. Wisconsin, maybe all of you know this, but Wisconsin isn't like a lot of states that have the voters can vote on binding referendums. It's like Colorado, there's always signs, vote no on this, vote yes on this, and they have numbers and the ballots are huge. And so we don't have that. So every now and then we'll get a binding referendum. One was on civil unions, that because that if the legislature passes the referendum idea, two legislators sessions, so 2 years and 2 years. Then it goes to the people to vote on it. By the time it gets there, usually it's gonna pass. And I don't know if you guys remember the civil union and the ballot. I was, monitoring the polls. I probably read that thing 50 times. My school didn't understand what it said. It's like, wait, do I answer yes or no? So Evers wants to have a binding referendum to be able to make a process to make it constitutional in our state constitution. To legalize abortion. But that's a very complicated process, particularly when Evers, the legislature doesn't agree with Evers on anything to get them to pass something 2 terms in a row. I'm involved with Marcy's law case, which passed, and I don't know if anyone paid attention to it, but that was a victims' rights bill that passed for 2 different sessions with the legislature. And then there was a constitutional amendment, basically that said, you support victim rights. And everyone went, yeah, I do. I'm sure, huge majority of people. But we're challenging it now, this group I'm involved with, because of what it does for dependents' rights. It's a little bit convoluted argument, but it is really helping with a lot of referendums. Now, Johnson's idea of a referendum is he wants a vote on how long people think abortion should be, on the age really for a child up to when they have abortion. It's a very convoluted thing, but leaving it up to the voters to say between conception to birth, at what point is the cutoff when you can't have an abortion? Of course, no one's going to vote for, I say 8 months. It seems like everyone's going to say it. Rather just not even do that scientific medical decision thing, which is what a lot of the politicians are saying now, which is probably good. They are doctors, they don't have like liability as well. It should be. And Evers, there's a push for the criminal law to stay in place, and he won't sign any legislation to keep that in place. And a little factoid is he's vetoed 146 bills. He's kind of under the radar guy, but it's more than have ever been vetoed in Wisconsin for sure, and maybe nationwide in one legislative session in 3 years, 146 bills. That's how basically dysfunctional our government is. Okay. So our very own Planned Parenthood, I just stuck these in because, when people think of Planned Parenthood, they think of abortions. And these are just their stats from 2021. And, the abortion number is pretty darn small. I don't know if you all have been to their health clinic in Southwater. Has anyone been there? It's just a gorgeous place. And it's so wonderful they built it. And they had to do it totally in secret because I think people just viewed it as this abortion mill. And it does all these other services, which they were doing in their building on Jackson, tiny building. So, yeah.
Could we ask a question? has anybody here used Planned Parenthood?
Right on.
That's just nice to see.
Very good question.
Yeah, as a college student, it's my only option. If
Absolutely.
I didn't have any money and I didn't have any healthcare, I wasn't working and I was too old to be on my parents, so if I needed any kind of medical services, I had to go to Planned Parenthood.
Were you a satisfied customer?
Yeah, honestly, yeah, you know.
Very
Very
satisfying.
informative, any questions, and it made you feel really comfortable.
Yeah, I mean,
Ask anything.
I even had to go for the flu, you know, just because I had no other option. Or, you know, emergency care clinics and Walgreens didn't exist.
All right, good. Wisconsin Right to Life, robust group. The Catholic Church has been very organized. Anti-abortion group, and they really have been a lot sort of behind the scenes too. I mean, they don't. It's like you hear that much about this beautiful activism.
Which is really funny because the Catholic Church actually supported abortions as long as you were Protestant.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that much into it. That's.
Yes, because they didn't want the Protestants. Yeah, they didn't want the Protestants to outbreed them, so as long as you were Protestant, they weren't born, they just totally. I wonder if they're still going. It was big in Ireland during the.
No, I don't. US. Okay, so here we have good old father Donald Weber, who was one of the sort of the founders of the Right to Life chapter here. And then, this is interesting, Tommy Thompson, who I just saw. Yes. Was the first pro-life governor sort of out there publicly. And then Reagan was the first pro-life president. Then Barbara Lyons, I don't know if you all have heard about her. She was a force of nature. 40 years she was the president of Wisconsin Right to Life. Wisconsin Right to Life has been important for politically. I think that it was Wisconsin Right to Life that showed the Hillary Clinton movie, but there was a certain blackout period before elections, and this is before the presidential election, and they showed an anti-abortion movie as part of their electioneering in the blackout period, and it went to the Supreme Court, and it was determined that that was against free speech, which a lot of people would agree with. I would agree with that it was unconstitutional prohibition of speech on the election. That led them to Citizens United, which has unleashed all of the corporate money and dark money and free speech. Then under Walker, the ultrasound law passed in the 20 weeks. Pain law, didn't really look into the pain law that much, but that was a big, terrible part of PR was when can the fetus feel pain, which is just such a horrible thought. But I guess it was determined at 20 weeks, so that the ban was up to 20 weeks for Wisconsin, but that was not seen as a. And then this was just thrown in this Right to Life research I was doing. There was a 17% drop in abortions from the 1980s high. Now, what does that mean? I don't know what it means. It's the heyday of abortions in the 80s. But maybe it means with more and more restrictions that there were less abortions. Okay, Dobbs. One of the Alito quotes is that one. There's no reference in the Constitution, which we all know, to the right to have abortion. So they're giving it back to the states. That's where this little map comes in. So there. We which talks about where we're at, right? This is the law that was challenged was this Mississippi law that they banned abortion after 15 weeks and except for life, no. If this was challenged in 73, it would have been overturned. But they upheld this law. They didn't see it as an undue burden on women's reproductive rights. And so it's just what's the difference? Roberts, though, I guess felt like it was okay. That it was okay to keep the law, but he didn't want to completely obliterate abortion. He wouldn't have gone that far. The scary part of this decision is the Thomas concurrence, which is very, very bold, I think. That you would say, I think we should look at all of these cases as well, which is a married person's right to contraception. And let me say a couple of things about the Griswold case, because I'm old enough that I remember these things, 1965. This is one of the first cases where they used the term the right to privacy. This woman, a woman named Estelle Griswold, opened a Planned Parenthood clinic in Haven in 61. And I think they closed it down in 10 days. And so by the time it got to court by 1969, it got decided, and they used the term right to privacy. That's the right to be left alone by the state. The first time this concept was ever, at least as far as I can tell, was with Justice Brandeis in 1928. Privacy was the most comprehensive of all the rights. The Griswold said the U.S. Constitution grants Americans a right to privacy through the Bill of Rights. Now I can go through each of the Bill of Rights, but you probably don't. Particularly, a lot of things land on the 14th Amendment, but right to privacy can be seen in the first, third, fourth, fifth, and ninth amendments. You can see me after class. So that was a big case, and it was, yeah.
How can our country give more privileges and rights to privacy to someone that's married, but if you're not, you don't get it?
Well, that was in 65. Things moved along.
Okay.
Which is a good thing. But before Griswold, one of the things that happened was, which is sort of reminiscent of COVID, only even worse, rubella. In 64, there was a 2-year span of rubella. Women who were exposed to rubella had kids, the German measles, would have kids that would have all kinds of problems. I have a friend who's deaf here, but that would not have been reason to not carry the pregnancy term. But there were lots of disabilities from exposure to German measles. So there was a lot more awareness. Maybe it is true. We need to look at the fetus and look at the rights of the mother and what we learn about pregnancy. And then back to the Catholics. The Catholics did a lot of pressure on the church to allow birth control for married people, and which is interesting because my mother, who wasn't a Catholic, I wasn't a Catholic. She became a rabid Catholic when she was out of childbearing years, and I was like, where'd that come from? Because she wanted to be able to use birth control to control her reproduction. And she didn't talk about it. But and then when she no longer had to worry about birth control, she became this big time Catholic. So in 1964, there was a commission set up in the Catholic Church, and they said that birth control should be legal for Catholics. It should be okay between married. But then Pope Paul VI, you all remember him. He came out with what's called the Humane VTI. This is what it said about birth control. Every marital act of sex must, I don't think you use sex, every marital act must of necessity retain its intrinsic relationship to the procreation of human life. So basically, every time you have sex, it's appropriated. End of story.
Spoken by Sullivan.
What?
Spoken by Sullivan then.
Well, so for all we know.
Well, according to what he was supposed to be doing.
So in 1966, now was formed. You remember now. First one. But I don't know. Anyway, they were formed and they were mainly around workplace and education for women. They were just a regular old women's well-rounded organization. And some radicals got involved with the right to for women to control the life. And so that had caused in the mid-60s this huge movement. Now a lot of people left. 1972, and I actually knew this guy there. He was in Boston, but he won a case, I was that married, birth control for unmarried women. It was a 6-1 decision. It was based on the right of privacy, right of an individual, married or not. That's a big deal, I think. As the right to birth control is as fundamental as the decision to bear the child. Okay. All right, then, so Laura, yeah, so Griswold, then Lawrence was the same sex, can't see Lawrence, same sex. Sex. It's legal, and then Overfeld, which is people's right to marriage. So these are all the ones that Clarence Thomas thinks are up for grabs because they relied on the right to privacy. So who knows what will happen in the future?
Isn't HIPAA all about the right to privacy?
Is what?
HIPAA,
Right, yeah.
so
Yeah.
it seems like a direct contradiction to that.
Well, because now Alito said there's no right to privacy in the Constitution, so if you bring a case saying it's your constitutional right to have an abortion, say there's not one word in the Constitution that gives you that right. Versus, 7 other decisions that found a way to say. you have that right. So after Dobbs, 13 states banned. These are just the stats. Wisconsin is the red, which is the most banned. It's right up there with Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana. Some of our really good friends. So 24 states abortion is still available. Other than that,
Michigan,
what?
where are we with Michigan? As far as their, we're red. Michigan is red.
No, dependent on new law or change in party control. Uncertain. Michigan is uncertain. Minnesota's good, or Minnesota has access. Illinois has access. Iowa, iffy. But Iowa has marijuana legal. And so Michigan. And Wisconsin's like a little island. Those liberal Midwest states.
How did we get the red one?
I'll tell you later. So my parent is working with Waukegan mightily with exchanging. Nurses are traveling there. It's really a sacrifice. I know. And it affects, since it makes it harder to get an abortion, it's going to affect healthcare in general. This statistic is a Wisconsin statistic. But just the way it's issues are discriminatory. Increased maternal mortality, 21%, 33% of Black women. Congress, and so Biden can't do anything. That's why and then the DHS in response is more money for implementing services, which basically more access to birth control, more sex education. Things that have also gotten very, very smushed in the last 2 years.
So the last piece about Congress can restore, how does that fit in relation to the Supreme Court?
Well, it would override the Supreme Court if it would be legislation. Now, someone can bring a case. So that legislation, they make a law and then someone can challenge it, saying that, you know, what's the basis of this law or so it would go back. Up, you know. And the you know, glimmer of just Congress being able to do anything like that feels so out of sight. You know, you don't have to worry about that. So this is just stats on how the right is really diminished. And one of the stats is that women are having kids later, which is, you know, I think makes sense, and that as they get older and you're pregnant, there's more chance of difficulties and abnormalities, reasons that you might choose to have an abortion. Medication abortion. So one of the things people are thinking about is having Biden and the FDA do approval, so then it would be more accessible. But I guess right now it's not FDA approved. The states have access to it. And then one of the strains running through is doctors' care and doctors' training and doctors staying in the state. Why stay in the state if you can't have comprehensive training? If you're in OBGYN, you can't. I think medical schools now are thinking in Wisconsin you can't even train people. Certainly not commercial birth, but some of the birth. You know, emergencies or hard cases. And then prohibiting medication by mail. This will give a whole new job description for postal service. And yeah, and then people are worried about IUDs because IUDs, you know, make it so you don't get exception. Is that going to be something that's going to be against this latest decision? And then I'll leave you with that question. I'm just pregnancy again. You know the answer. Raise your hand. I think that's about it. I do have these definitions. Conception. Pregnancy begins with cells cluster and adhere to the uterus. Fetus, growing pregnancy from 9 weeks of gestation to birth. So I guess that's the definition of the fetus, 9 weeks to birth. And then viability, can survive outside the womb 24 weeks, have 50% odds of survival. That's the way the statistic is defined. But they're saying, yes, you can keep the baby alive. So when
It's 8.
okay. Just one little thing that I learned was that in Goodyear, we developed rubber. They made the first condoms, and I don't know if any of you call them rubbers, but some people call them rubbers. But and there's just one other person I'll tell you about, Anthony Comstock. They referred to it as what happened with Anthony was Comstockery. In 1872, he began a one-man crusade against obscenity. And he'd go around setting up people, and we got a law passed in New York for starters about obscenity. And he'd set people up with, I don't know, dirty magazines or something. And then he'd get them arrested. And he just became this like, I mean, he was sort of the beginning of this anti-sex thing, I guess. So he plant obscene material with different people. I think he went door to door selling subscriptions and then they'd get them in the mail and then she'd tell the police they come and arrest. When he had trapped this woman and it was still, and she killed herself right before the trial. I mean, there's terrible things. And during this period, they censored George Bernard Shaw. Of course, they censored Ulysses, which I'm familiar with, censored James Joyce's and nude art paintings. It was a tough time with old him. But it drove all this stuff kind of underground. So it was a very, very that's it.
Thank you.
Oh, I have a question. I was listening to a segment on NPR in which women of different faiths, I think there was a Muslim woman and a Jewish woman and maybe a Christian, I don't know. But they were talking about the whole idea of when does life begin? And it seems that became, from this interview that I was listening to, it kind of opened my thinking to, it's a very Christian attitude to, and I think of myself as a Christian, or at least, fallen. But it seems like that's a religious definition, that life begins at conception. And so if we're separating church and state, how do we define something that matches up with one religion and not with other major religions of the world?
That's one of the things. There's a big move now to not separate church and state. Makes it a lot easier for that argument.
Except for the fact that the Bible specifically says that life begins at first breath. Well, then there you go. Oh, well, but was that Jewish law? That's the Bible. Old Testament or New Testament? Old Testament. It's Old Testament. Yeah. So, and there's actually instructions on how to have an abortion in the Bible. And that's Old Testament as well. So,
Yeah, they're going on a long time.
yeah, it's been a while. It's such a fuzzy line that continues to get fuzzier and fuzzier.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing of definition is huge. I mean, just doing my research. I never really thought about it that way.
Do you have any idea of the timeline or the current status of the litigation brought by the Attorney General on whether, what statute applies in Wisconsin, either the 1800s law or the current law? Do you know where that is or how long it's going to take to resolve?
It's going to take a long time. And there was something last Monday that was supposed to happen there.
Right now, could you get an abortion in the state of Wisconsin? No, you can't.
Not one.
It immediately stopped. After
In those 3 clinics, they just, Planned Parenthood and affiliated has one. Planned Parenthood, they just shut down. They didn't even try to.
So when I was pregnant, my doctor said you might be become critical to survive. This is the big patient. That doesn't exist in the world.
Well, I don't know what doctors, well, I don't even know what they can say. They must give legal instructions from up there to Julie.
Oh,
Julie knows.
well, so a friend of mine is an OBGYN who deals with pregnant women and, works here in Milwaukee. And it is a very, concerning time for them specifically with regard to, when someone has a, miscarriage. And they, or they are miscarrying. And yet there still is a fetal heartbeat, and then, if they're bleeding, what would happen, early miscarriage, if there's a heartbeat, but, there wouldn't be, it would be a miscarriage, they would perform a DNC. And that protects a woman so that, again, tissue can be removed and you don't get infection and become septic and all those complications. But now, they are reluctant to do that. Because of this, and so they're watching them, they're hospitalizing them, but when you just think of the, healthcare costs, hospitalizing someone to do that and watching for fear that if, this is going to be a spontaneous abortion, this is going to be a miscarriage, but we can help this along and prevent other problems like infection, like, things like that. They're unwilling to do that. So they're hospitalizing, they're waiting, women are, bleeding and, it's spreading out the process in a way that isn't in the best interest of the mother. And they're doing that now for fear of prosecution being the first person who's gonna be,
Could waiting like that actually do damage to the woman where she may never be able to breathe again? Could that?
I'm not a medical doctor. I don't know any of that.
Could that situation where now they have to wait, this woman gets sick, she gets septic, they wait so long now,
Well, I
and
mean,
then she's no longer.
I
I
don't,
was gonna have a panel with medical professionals
Yeah.
here to talk about it, but I
That's
was like,
yeah,
Jackie just knows so much that.
that would be a good thing to talk to medical people. I think though, what they are doing, from my friend who was talking to me about this, is that they are, they're not allowing someone to get septic. But
They are stepping in.
absolutely,
acting
yes, they
simple.
are stepping in, but it's not, if you think of like best practice for care, when their body is having a miscarriage, that they are, and we're not talking again, this is spontaneous abortion,
Yeah, like-
it's not even,
Nature has decided that
Yeah.
it's not going.
they are, they're not as quickly moving to DNC.
So if
Okay.
you, at least according to what I read, if you have a miscarriage or you have an abortion, there are many times they look exactly the same, as you get,
It's the same procedure.
comes out, then you can get the DNC. And so doctors are afraid that, people can come after you for saying this was an abortion, like, well, no, wait, it was really a miscarriage. It was terrible.
Who are these vigilantes?
Well, I don't know, that's, everyone's scared, so it doesn't matter if they actually have a problem. That's good that we get that tip on what doctors really are doing.
And they're, yeah,
I just have medical advance and being told, your child has special needs. And I was told 3 times to get rid of my child by the doctors. He said she shouldn't be born. So, I don't know. It's a big topic.
Well, I appreciate your all being so.
I do have a question for you. I just relocated from Arizona, so I'm getting acquainted to all the intricacies. But if Wisconsin has now made illegal to have an abortion, and let's say I live here, I work here, I want to go, and I have insurance, because let's say I, through my employer, my spouse. But since I'm not able to have it done here, and I want to go and have it done at my neighbor state, would my insurance cover that?
That's a good question. I'm assuming it would, but. I don't know. The insurance companies probably are going through a lot of soul searching.
Yeah.
know,
Be interesting.
they're looking for one, but.
Yeah, right. Like if you were traveling and you had to have your appendix out, your insurance would cover it.
Because when I be traveling for work and an accident happens, I mean,
Right, or even if you were just gone on vacation in a different state and got into a car accident and broke your leg, the insurance would cover that.
So would these be treated as any other medical procedure and things happened and I needed to have that cover as any other medical procedure would that be covered?
No idea.
And if you went to a state that had legal abortions, would your home state be able to, I just heard, peripherally, they will track you down and that they will bring their laws into your state, calling it full faith and credit that you can't have an abortion because your state doesn't allow it.
I'm gonna start talking about the commerce law.
No, it's just the dormant.
I don't know. I mean, that's all sort of the projection of.
Well, before they allowed getting married, people were getting married in different states.
Wouldn't that- But they weren't having the same rights. though, were they?
That's true.
It was, yeah.
Yes, then you have a question.
Yes, and I'm interested in knowing if anything can be done, or it's just a personal thing. I know a woman, her and her husband, she was pregnant, and throughout the beginning of the pregnancy, after a while, tests showed the baby didn't have a brain. So upon birth, it wasn't going to make it. But the doctor kept them going and going and going till it was past legal time for abortion. And then his values came out after the fact that he didn't believe in it. Is there any rights they have that a doctor has to tell you what they believe in? And that they had to go through this. She had to have the baby. They had to listen to it. And I can only imagine the heartbreak.
That's an example. I've read examples like that. Of, so obviously an abnormality that it's tragedy and then you have to.
And the healing afterwards that they had to go through.
There was a statistic of Down syndrome, which, you can get tested for Downs, which, this is a very sensitive area. And the statistic was 65 to 83% of women whose babies test positive for Downs get an abortion. And you can only get a abortion, you can only tell about Down syndrome in 15 weeks or more, 16 weeks. But because like Lindsey Graham suggested this 15-week thing, which even the Republicans like, where did that come from? But 15 weeks is so low that there are all kinds of tests and abnormalities. that we can't proceed. I don't think
Great
We
job,
done, Mom?
Jackie. Thank you. We have a battle line for you. Oh, no, I think we need
It
to
was
do this.
my neighbor.
There you go. And thank you so much.
This is your dad's stash.
No, this is last week, our panel. So I have to keep it. She was on Zoom. Next week we have Bay Bridge coming, really excited. Ann O'Connor, Jennifer Olsta, and Captain Worth are going to talk about how the story of how Bay Bridge was launched, which is an anti-racism effort in Michigan. And then we do have 3 open offices at MalamaDoe. One is here, if you know of anyone looking for an office space.
It's a great deal. Good printer.
Her office is coming available. That's another one. You can someday.
Sorry, I have a question about
Yeah.
that. Do you do just offices or do you also like rent the conference rooms?
Yeah, for $165 a month, you can reserve our conference rooms. All right, and that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Actually, some jurisdictions where, and in Wisconsin, where as a part of medical malpractice, a doctor can be liable for malpractice if they do not, get the informed consent, which in some jurisdictions, the informed consent is explaining all the options available to them. So including diagnostics or, treatment or through the pregnancy and certain circumstances. So if you have a doctor that would know information that would consider part of a patient's informed consent, then I think the resolution there is bringing practice back. But then finding out